Disclaimer: this show is not for the faint of heart or the easily offended. The views expressed here are that of the show hosts only, and not their wives, girlfriends, husbands, boyfriends, polygamous partners, employers, music artists, businesses, or anyone other than the Cognitive Disillusions podcasters. The explicit tag is there for a good reason. Please proceed with caution.
Every one of us will have to decide whether or not we want to keep this great republic or whether we're willing to sacrifice it and surrender it to tyranny.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Cognitive Disillusions podcast, where we address the current issues of today with brash humor, skepticism, or aggression to invoke critical thinking in the masses. We take our tightly held beliefs, everyone's tightly held beliefs, mash them up with current events, politics, and religion, then throw them to the fires of skepticism. We magnify the so-called logic, then blow it all up. There is no green zone of safety for a lack of critical thinking. This is episode number 19. Your hosts today are John, Joel, and I'm Al, and we are your tormentors. How are you guys doing today? John, Joel, anybody? Hello.
So now we've reverted to like this ridiculous game of chicken, I guess. Like, who's gonna talk first?
You know what? I'm good. History Channel actually has decent programming on today, so I'm watching Ancient Aliens. Because we all like aliens. Aliens are awesome. And besides, right now, Wernher von Braun is in Walt Disney's Man in Space, 1965 Man in Space, on Ancient Aliens, on History Channel. How fucking awesome is that?
Not really sure.
I guess I wouldn't. I guess we have different continuums of awesome. That would be my first guess.
Yeah, some people like Bigfoot, you know.
Yeah.
Well, there are a lot of non-skeptical positions that people take on things. You know, I know that Joel had an experience lately. You want to give a rundown on that, Joel?
Well, yeah, and we were talking, before the show, the three of us, about what we wanted to talk about today, and I just had an experience that kind of made me start thinking about this, and basically it was just somebody that I know who, there's no reason not to say who it is, but I'm not going to, just because, that was bringing up having a belief in ghosts, I think. Yeah, it kind of was more than that. It was more about spirits and that kind of stuff, so maybe ghost is a little narrow of a term to use, but it just made me think that the three of us, in our own very unique way, are very skeptical people, and we have a pretty reasonable understanding of the science that's out there and what's more or less true and what's more or less not. And I find it sometimes hard to have any kind of a meaningful conversation that doesn't regress into sort of just bewilderment or ad hominem attacks, kind of, when I am encountering people that I believe in things that I think are kind of silly, just because there's just no evidence that they're real, and I get all this contrived evidence that is being kind of spewed at me, and all these justifications and cognitive dissonance and so on, and it really, I don't really necessarily want to get into whether or not some of this stuff is or is not real. There's certainly the possibility that I could be wrong on all accounts. It just seems unlikely. But I really was hoping that we could talk about how we communicate in those situations, so that we don't end up just saying, you know what, fuck off, this is stupid. Something that doesn't feel like we're just alienating our friends or loved ones, and either disregarding them or making them feel stupid or whatever, because that's not helpful either. So that's kind of our jumping off point, and whether or not we get into how to talk about specific claims and refuting them, I don't know. We'll see. We've got an hour to do this. But, initially, do you guys have any thoughts about this topic?
I think this is going to devolve into a conversation about objective versus subjective truth.
Well, I hope not. We've done enough of that.
I think that would be a poor place to start considering the conversation.
Idiot.
Well, in response to your circumstances, Joel, I've had a lot of those conversations, and really for me it depends on how things progress. I mean, initially I take a Socratic approach to things, asking questions, trying to find out why they apply, what they view as evidence in one direction versus why they didn't apply the same thing to this particular topic, whatever it happens to be. Ghosts, energy, afterlife, spirits, aliens, Bigfoot, whatever.
Woo science, healing crystals.
History.
History.
So, I mean, it depends on the person, and it depends on really which personality is in charge for the day.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes, and I've lost a lot of friends by being very, very blunt and direct.
By being off your meds, yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, I've lost several friends by simply going, why the fuck do you believe that? That is the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
You never lost me as a friend. Come on.
Not you, John. You've actually...
No, me. You've said that to me a few times.
Oh, I've said it to you several times, but you at least are cognitively aware and intelligent enough to go, okay, so he had a critique on a critical level, not a critique of me and my beliefs.
So
does that make sense?
What you're saying is I'm not inherently emo. I can live with that.
Well, yeah, you didn't take the criticism of the idea as a personal attack on you.
Yeah, that's a big deal.
And that's one thing that I run into quite a bit is a lot of people for the most part, now granted my friends list has dwindled down to the people that aren't this way, but they take, since they are so dead set in their beliefs, say for instance a belief in ghosts, goblins, they're so dead set in a mindset that when you challenge the belief, they view it as you're challenging them and calling them an idiot. Yeah, why are you judging me? So it depends on the person, I guess.
Well, it's interesting too because you have those people that say, "Well, I can believe whatever I want. Who are you to say that I can't believe in that?" And it's really at that point that the conversation's over.
I was about to say almost the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, once you're there, then obviously it's regressed into something contentious, and you then have to decide, how important is this relationship compared to having this conversation. And that's a bummer when that happens because, even if you are diametrically opposed on something with somebody, it's fun to have these debates sometimes, even if they get heated. I enjoy that. But yeah, when feelings start getting hurt or the timing's just not right or whatever,
Yeah, you have to have those debates with people who want to have those debates. And a lot of people, in my experience, people need to have a grip on reality, even if that means believing in something that maybe isn't real. Let's take a good close personal look at it.
Hold on, you got to explain that. So in order for someone to understand reality, they can implement believing in things that aren't real?
Well, I plan on it, yeah, and that's exactly what I'm implying. Let's.
Sorry.
Okay, so in a person's universe, the only thing that really exists is what they perceive, whether that's in their eyes, in their nose, in their five senses, or in what some scientists might call the sixth sense, which in my opinion happens to be the imagination. When it boils down to it, what people perceive is as real as they want it to be. So if I am perceiving that, George III existed in England, in the 1700s, I'm reading a book, I'm maybe looking at a picture, I might be looking at a gravestone, I might even be looking at bones, but none of these things are George III. And I don't exist in the 17th century. So whether George III existed in the 17th century or not, I can't possibly know. All I have are these things that indicate something that may or may not be true. So even history is not real. That headstone is real. The words on it are real. But what it implies, the implication, of course, of that headstone is that there's a king that's buried here, and that king was King of England. But I don't know that for certain. I have to take it on faith that headstone is on top of a burial, and that there's a body in there, and that body belonged to the person that the headstone says it belonged to. I'm taking it on faith that is actually what's going on.
And I don't think faith's the right word there.
Oh, I absolutely do. And that's a perfect example of something actually in history, because this kind of thing happens all the time. We think one thing, and then some researcher gets a wild hair up his ass and says, "Well, wait a minute, that doesn't sound."
But that's not
right.
what faith is. Faith is believing things without any evidence or any attempt at obtaining evidence.
Not necessarily.
It really is, because we have to talk about epistemology. How do we know what we know? First of all, there's no epistemology that's ever going to be universally true for eternity, except by accident. Okay, so the starting point is when I make a claim that ghosts aren't real, I'm saying ghosts aren't real. I'm saying I don't think ghosts are real based on the fact that I don't think there's enough evidence right now for me to make the claim that they are real. I'm not saying that there's no evidence that could ever come to light that will change my mind. So,
well, you would also have to come to a common definition, a common frame of reference of what a ghost is, because that guy who claims he believes in ghosts may or may not have seen something that he is framing as a ghost experience. It may very well have been something else. It might have been microwaves. It might have been, ball lightning. It might have been any number of things. But again, this person perceived something. And in his imagination, in that reason, in that space where his senses are combined in his brain and he comes up with a solution, that's the process of reason. That's the process of cognition. Somewhere in there, he reached into some arcane portion of his brain, and it told him, you know what, maybe it's ghosts. You know what, I'll buy that. It's a ghost. You can't step into someone else's shoes and perceive something for them.
No, you can't, but you can talk to them about the construct and see if their mapping of reality matches the reality that evidence and objective interview or objective discovery can find. So one approach that I take is, if somebody says, I saw a ghost, okay, I don't discount that you believe you saw a ghost. That's the first starting point that I go from.
Beautiful.
I don't start from the perception or the viewpoint that you don't believe what you saw.
Okay, stop there.
I believe you had an experience that you can't explain that you've attributed to ghosts. What evidence do you have now that it was a ghost?
Beautiful. Hang on, because I know where you're going with this, and I will let you continue with that line of thought. But this is the point at which that person's perceptions are no longer the only data that person is using. That person is an island until you enter the picture and start adding data to the puzzle. The data that I'm talking about is, of course, asking that person to reevaluate and then countering with, well, maybe it was this. Do you understand where I'm going with this?
Well, I think we've already established that we're to that point based on the premise of the conversation, which is, when you get into discussions, you're already adding other perspectives inherently at that point. So, I think we're past that. Of course, we all can delude ourselves about all kinds of things until we try and seek outside resources to find out whether or not these things are true.
I think delude.
We do that. No. It's not meant to be harsh. It's meant to be true. It's meant to be, that there are things that we certainly all. I mean, I know one thing that comes to mind is personal image. We all have this personal image and of ourselves, and it's a bummer that oftentimes it's not nearly as good as we actually are perceived by others. I know I struggle with that quite a bit, and until you step outside of your own internal works, your own internal map of yourself and of the world and how you think it works, until you get out of that and engage other people's interpretations, you're not. Yes, you can delude yourself into just about anything, but it's whether or not you're willing to listen to the perspective of others and incorporate that into your data points that is where things get awry. I think a lot of people don't want to do that. They want to continue in whatever belief they have, regardless of whatever else might be out there.
Now, hang on, not necessarily, because I know. Okay.
No, not necessarily. I'm not saying I'm not being equivocal. I'm saying that this does happen.
Where I was going with all of this and interrupting you guys and explaining all this was you asked, how do you handle this? Well, I'm kind of building to a certain crescendo here. And the first point of that crescendo, the first plot point in that story,
the insertion.
Is to realize that person's reality is based on his perceptions, and what he has perceived is his reality. That's the first thing to realize.
Yeah, but it doesn't mean that his reality is the shared reality of everybody.
No, absolutely, and it's very important that every individual get that through their thick fucking skulls, Donald fucking Trump. That you. No?
Oh man! Just when I was getting frustrated, he just saved himself. Oh, that's great.
No, and it's so extraordinarily important that everybody realize that this is going on, and it's going on in everybody all around. It's going on in your cat.
Sure. She probably thinks I'm a god.
No, the second.
Doesn't pay her enough attention.
No. Cats were gods for 3,000 years.
Your cat thinks she or he is the god, and you're its servant.
Oh yeah.
Cats are like people; they're all assholes.
So at this point, the second plot point, the second insertion, is where they talk to somebody, they debate, they have a religious conversation, they have a discussion about history, or they talk about fucking Trump, and they come to that mutual shared reality that's not the one side or the other side, but it's somewhere in between. And I think that's the point at which Al was at when he was going to continue his line of thought. Because, yeah.
You expect him to remember where he was?
I do.
You're expecting way more out of me, buddy.
I don't even remember where he was.
Now, what John said is somewhat my viewpoint, but it differs quite a bit. While I do understand that people have their own perceived reality, it doesn't always comport to the reality that we all share. And without getting into the whole we might be living in a Matrix bullshit, brain of that kind of thing, or even that our universe is a hologram, which is being studied right now, without getting into that fucking advanced physics and bullshit. It's the fact that there has to be some empathy towards the person's mindset and how fragile they may be. In conjunction with the information that you're trying to extract, evaluate, possibly share, and see if there is any impact there.
Or possibly look at that reality matrix that they've got going on in their head and then smash it with a ball-peen hammer.
Well, yeah, but I depending on how the person is can depend on which approach you take. Like I know with John, I knew just by having shorter conversations with John, I knew that I could go, you know what, that's fucking bullshit. And we would still have a conversation and a good working relationship and friendship that wouldn't get dissolved by me being blunt. Some people, if you are blunt with them, they completely close off. And I know, Joel, you've seen this. John, you've seen this with other people. Whether they're religious or whether they're steadfast on UFOs and insisting that UFO was aliens. And this is one of my favorite examples is the UFO, because people go, oh, I saw a UFO, aliens are here. No, motherfucker, what does the first letter stand for? Unfucking identified. So
I think you're taking some liberties with that.
I certainly am.
You added a little concept to that.
Yeah. So it's unidentified. It may very well be a flying object. We're not sure. We don't know. Like John said, it could be ball lightning. It could be a plasma array. Could be anything.
It could be an unidentified fucking object for all we know.
Yeah. We don't know if it's a dildo shooting through the air. We don't know if one of the astronauts on the ISS lost a fucking vibrator. We don't know.
You know what? Cylinders, man. People seeing cylinders all over the world.
Yeah. Well, you see a float of a flying object. You're unable to identify it. And people go, that's aliens. Some people do. Some of us that are critical go, wow, that was a really interesting event. A phenomena that I don't have an answer for yet. I don't know what that was. Cool. I can either look into it at that point or just go, I had a cool unknown experience. That's awesome. Some people, ghosts, goblins, non-virgin Dungeons and Dragons players, whatever the myth is.
Watch it, buddy.
Santa, the Easter Bunny, they go to these conclusions before they evaluate the data, and I like to have the conversation and extract why they believe in these ghosts, or one person said, "Oh, that's not a ghost, that was a phantasm." In a conversation that I had with somebody else, they interjected, well, we hadn't even established that a fucking ghost was there, and this person's already correcting on what type of entity that may have been. What the fuck?
No, it made noise. I heard it. It was a banshee.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, yeah, I think you had it right at the beginning. The best way to approach, to my knowledge, it feels like the best way to approach a lot of this stuff is, through the Socratic method. But again, it also comes down to whether or not people value evidence and how they do that, how they figure all that out in their mind, what they consider to be reliable evidence and not. And one thing that you're never probably going to be able to break through is if you don't also agree on what is considered good evidence and what is just, conjecture or subjectivity or something along those lines. And I hesitate to say that because I know we can get down into that rabbit hole of subjectivity again. I worry that if you think that everything has the potential for being subjective, which I guess it technically does, you end up not being able to really make any truth claims in any kind of predictable way, and that makes me nervous. It seems impractical at best. So I can't really remember where I was going with that, but
well, the root of this, the conversation that you brought up was how do you approach it? How do you? I don't know if you're trying to get through to the person or just trying to handle the situation in general.
Truthfully, at that moment, I was just trying to deflect and get out of it. For that particular circumstance, and I don't necessarily want to get into the specifics of that, but yeah, I guess I do want to talk about generalities, like what are some ways to approach some of these conversations where you can get through it without pissing people off.
Well, like I said, it's going to depend. Like for instance, with you, you're a really big fan of Sam Harris.
I am,
and you like his approach on things.
For the most part, yeah.
For the most part. One of the two people that had the biggest impact on me with critical evaluation of a lot of ideas that I had was Hitch and Dawkins. And
who I'm also big fans of.
Yeah, and those were my primary. Sam Harris was always too soft for me. Too gentle. I like a lot of his stuff, but he's got a softer approach, along with Dan Dennett, who I admire and respect quite a bit. Hitchens, for those that don't know, Christopher Hitch, he had this blunt, very barbed, very direct approach, and I loved that.
But incredibly eloquent.
Oh, God, yeah.
I mean, a wordsmith like we've not seen in some time.
Yeah, and so...
And a wit. Oh my God, razor wit.
Oh God, between him and Dawkins, those approaches to establishing critical thinking, Matt Dillahunty and Arn Ra had great input on critical evaluation of evidence, just evidence-based things. And I was an evidence-based person, scientifically minded, but even I had a lot of flaws in my thinking. And those two primary head ramps, the shock of it made me go, oh fuck, I'm really flawed in this form of logic with my mind on this particular topic. I'm giving it, special pleading here where I normally wouldn't with other shit. And it opened my mind enough to go, let's evaluate everything. And I started picking through the rest of my life. So it's, again, it depends on your approach.
That can be really hard too. I don't mean to cut you off, but that can be a really hard thing when you realize that if you want the best chance at being as right as you can be, you really have to question everything. As cliche as that is now, which bums me out, but you really do have to ask yourself, is this true? Multiple times throughout your life on even the same kinds of ideas. So it's not an easy thing. It's uncomfortable as hell sometimes.
And and a lot of people say, well, the religious people, at least the atheist and a lot of the humanist side go, religious people don't have this. Well, yes, they fucking do. Yeah. One of our co-hosts on this show, John, he's a religious man. And very, very critical-minded, as everybody on the show knows. So, and a lot of us came from religious backgrounds. So there is the ability to question the mindset, question the authority, and actually go into it. But sometimes it takes the right person. I know several people I've spoke to have gone, you know what, fuck you. You're just a dick.
Well, and don't we all? I mean, one of the criticisms that a lot of atheists will have towards people that are religious is that they don't seem to put the same burden of proof on their religion as they do every other aspect of their life. So I would never say that a person is overall incapable of any kind of critical thinking. It's just that we all have our blind spots. And you either are going to accept that you have your blind spots and try to be mindful of that potential, because you may not even see that it is a blind spot for that particular thing, whatever it might be. But just knowing that you do have blind spots is a big first step, I think. So yeah, I totally agree with you. I mean, we are all capable of doing this thing, this critical thinking, and it is the best way to get to something as close to true as we can manage.
Well, and on the topic of feelings and hurting people's feelings, I've had this conversation with my peers numerous times, and the conclusion that we inevitably come to is that there's really no way not to hurt someone, and it comes down to the matter of that reality matrix that someone has. They're holding on to these tightly held beliefs, as you call them in the intro, and they're holding on to them because they've had them for either a long time or they've been told to them by someone who is extremely influential in their lives, and they have a lot of trust for these people. Well, if you as an outsider or as a friend, even as someone that you're intimate with this person but you've never had this conversation before, when you step in and you offer an alternative to that, all of a sudden it kind of cracks that reality matrix just a little bit, and that's damage. That's real damage. It's like taking a knife and cutting someone. And when I'm discussing this with other people in the program that I'm in, people who want to be pastors, and they're wondering, how can I talk to these people about things like divorce and homosexuality and infidelity? How can I talk to people about this stuff without hurting them? Well, you really can't. And from a Christian perspective, I think that the proper answer is, as a spiritual guide, you are there to cut that wound just a little bit and get the infection out and then let it heal. Notice next time you cut yourself after it heals, rub your finger over the scab and feel that it's a little harder than your normal skin. And then after it's done completely healing, run your finger over the scar, and you'll notice that it's a lot tougher. It's a lot more, it's disfigured, but it's a lot tougher than normal skin would otherwise be. After those cracks are made in that reality matrix, and after that person has a chance to come to grips with that, and that healing can be done, I think that reality matrix is a lot stronger, either for good, for good or for ill. That reality matrix is stronger than it was before.
Yeah, one thing that comes to mind is that learning is a hard thing, because once you're at about 3 years of age, you're no longer a blank slate, so to speak. You have a construct of reality that if you have to change that, you're having to get rid of other operating aspects of your operating system in order to fill it in with the new data. So, I mean, you get all these chunks of things all over the place, like, fragmented hard drive almost, and you do have to shed these things, these other constructs, in order to add new things in. So, yeah, it's a messy process learning about the world, and it's often very uncomfortable. It's also really counterintuitive to be comfortable in a place of not knowing, of admitting to yourself, I don't know this, especially about some of the more important things, about some of the more existential and scary things. That's a very uncomfortable place for anybody to be in, and I think that you really do have to be empathetic to those people that truly they do not want to, they can't handle it as well as some other people can, being in that space of unknowing.
And some people just flat out can't handle it, period.
They can't. Yeah.
I mean, I've seen personally, and this is, granted, I have no evidence to support this, so I'm going to throw that out there. But I have actually had conversations with people where their psyche, their ability couldn't handle it, couldn't process the challenge to their line of thinking. And several of them, well, I shouldn't say several, a few of them are now under mental health treatment because it cracked so much. They were so dependent on it. They couldn't handle it.
It's a traumatic event sometimes. It depends on where it is. It's like the chink in the armor. If that one dagger gets through that or finds that one loose place in your armor, who knows what's going to happen?
Well, and again, there are some pretty good indicators of whether or not somebody's going to be hurt by what you have to say. In the example you gave, you were talking to a friend, another coworker, another musician, who believed in ghosts. It seems to me that guy probably is not going to end up in a mental institution if you somehow convince him that ghosts are not real.
Sure.
Because he's also a musician. He's probably also got a job. He's probably also got a family. He's got a lot of different aspects to his life. He's got a lot of other things that he can lean on, other things that are buttressing that, reality matrix. Somebody like, I don't know, Egon from Ghostbusters, if you were to somehow convince him that ghosts weren't real, that might shatter his entire universe. See what I'm saying?
Yeah, and that's I'm certain that you're right on that, and I was never worried about it. But one of the things that I get concerned about, and I'm fairly certain that Al will know what I mean, and I think you will too, John, is that it is important to me, part of my identity is that I do have an open mind because I do want to learn. I do want my construct of reality to be as close to true as it can be. And so part of that is that I want people to think that I am an open-minded person. I think that I am, but there are certainly times when something will hit me that there's not a lot I feel like sometimes I'm prepared to do to come across that way, that I would entertain your notions, but I just happen to think they're ridiculous, so I'm kind of shutting it down, You know what I'm saying? Like,
you don't have a common frame of reference from which to have that conversation.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
But that's not to say that I'm not open-minded to evidence if it were presented to me. But what a lot of people I talk to about these things seem to fail to realize is I have heard all this stuff 100 fucking times before, and so I start to kind of lose my patience for these same tired arguments that I've heard over and over and over again, even though they have no reference to me having heard any of this before. And it's unreasonable for me to expect that they would. But it is a tough thing because you just kind of have to take a deep breath and go, I've heard this before. Just give your response, and just go through these motions, and that's not very fun. I like hearing new ideas and be like, whoa, okay, I got to figure this one out. That's exciting for me, and it's not really fair to that other person that hasn't been exposed to the same things that I've been exposed to share that or put that burden on them and dismiss their ideas instead of having a conversation that may or may not lead to them seeing it similarly as I do, or even better yet, them coming up with something where we've gotten through all of the ideas that I've heard over and over again, and all of a sudden, there's a new nugget I can digest and figure out.
I'd just like to take this opportunity to point out that you are describing exactly the situation that Father George Lemaitre was in when he proposed the cosmic egg that eventually became the Big Bang Theory. You're describing the same situation that Einstein was in when he first proposed general relativity. Isaac Newton, Copernicus, Galileo, all of these people shattered other people's reality matrices. And there were some who were able to take it, and there were some who were not. Fortunately for those people in those times and in those places, they were able to find enough people that would get on board with what they were talking about and be able to figure out that, you know what, there may actually be a grain of truth to what this guy is describing. You know, that the framework that this guy is laying onto this concept actually has some teeth. It actually has some weight to it. It's solid. I can wrap in my mind around it, and I can understand it. And that's the fundamental difference. And until someone is able to do that, then those things are going to be described in what we would otherwise refer to as supernatural or paranatural terms. You know, even, you know, here's a perfect example. Okay, I'm not going to talk about super strings.
I'll be the judge if it's perfect. Thank you.
Okay, I'm not going to talk about super strings. I'm not going to talk about parallel universes. I'm going to talk about something that all of us know something about: cells. Okay, unless you've got a microscope, you cannot see a cell. You cannot taste a cell. You can't feel it, hear it. You can't sense it at all without a microscope. It's too damn small.
True. No, not true.
Really? Okay.
They're
give me
8 feet by 6 feet.
Yeah, sure. Okay.
They have bars around them.
Yeah. Okay. And you know they're talented.
How did I know that was going to happen?
I'm talking about microbiology here. Okay.
Are we sure that I'm not psychic? Because I'm pretty sure I knew that was going to happen.
Yeah, because Al's an asshole. But anyway. Well, we can't call him a racist in this conversation. So
no, that'd be entirely inappropriate. Because all the other times were true, you know. But
no,
he hasn't said enough to qualify. I don't think he's met his word count yet.
That's a perfect example, though.
Ouch. No, I'm just saying that for whatever reason you haven't had too much of an opportunity. John and I are kind of going back and forth here.
Well, no, Joel, talk to me. Is there a way that you can perceive a microbiological organism without a microscope?
Well, I know that there are certain single cellular creatures that can barely be perceived by the naked eye, I think, or maybe a magnifying glass or something. Seems like I've heard that. But your point is taken. I absolutely accept your premise.
Without that piece of equipment or without that frame of reference, you can't. You're taking what someone is saying on faith until you've got that added piece of data. The Big Bang Theory is another wonderful example. I won't say perfect. It's another wonderful example. You, Joel, I, Al, my wife, my cat, nobody that I know has the capability to look up in the sky and find evidence for the Big Bang. But there are people in the world who can do that. They've got these big radio telescopes. They've got solar imagers. They've got a bunch of tools that they use to grab data, and then they collate it, and then they find these little nuggets of facts, these consistencies, these patterns, and they can speculate on what those patterns mean. All that is a framework.
Yeah, we certainly have to rely on other people doing some of the work. I mean, there's no doubt about that. And I reject the notion of using the word faith in this context, because that's not faith. That's
it really is.
It's just not. It's just not faith.
Unless you've got the tools to do that research, to do that thing that they did, and find out unequivocally, with absolutely no question in your mind, this is exactly what's going on. Unless you personally can do that, then you are taking it on faith that person has been,
here's the thing. The difference there, it's not faith. I certainly have trust in some of the people that do the scientific work, like you were mentioning. I trust that their methods are true. I know what those methods are. I know that they're using the scientific method to reach their conclusion. So I'm trusting in that method, and And as soon as someone proves that they didn't use that method or that their methodology was flawed in some other way, then I will no longer trust them. But it's not about faith. Faith is a totally different animal. Faith is belief without evidence. That's what it is. I have evidence. It's just an evidence from authority, which is again only so reliable to me. There are things that I experience directly are more reliable to me than things that I have to experience, at a distance or take trusting someone else is doing those things. There's a continuum there. It's not faith.
Trust is a wonderful word.
Hold on, John. You do this quite a bit, and this is a common apologetics issue. It's the conflation fallacy. It's taking a word with multiple meanings and misrepresenting it in two different contexts. So you go with faith as a secured trust or confidence in an idea, which is what scientists actually do, what people actually do, sort of like sitting down on a chair. You use the secured trust and confidence, the builders of chairs, because you've seen them work, you know that chairs work, and you have trust, a secure trust and confidence that chair is going to work. Mm-hmm. Yes, that is one definition of a word faith. But what the religious context of the word faith and how it's commonly used.
I'm not using it in a religious context.
Hold on. Faith is a belief without evidence, period, in a religious context. And you're taking religious ideas and placing them with scientific ideas and trying to say that we have faith. No, we have a secure trust and confidence. Yes, that is a definition of faith, but it's not the religious definition of faith. And let's be very clear from this point on, if we're going to have this podcast anymore, that the word faith is not going to be used when it comes to actual scientific data or evidence, because it is not fucking faith.
Okay, that's a little bit more of a stringent.
I'm sorry, that really fucking pisses me off when people use the conflation fallacy, and John fucking knows it.
I think, in ancient Greek, there is only one word to describe what in English.
Stop right now. Back it up. We're not in fucking ancient Greece, John.
No, we're not. Absolutely. We're in America, and we have...
Is there a better way that we can have this particular side of this conversation? Because this seems a little
not entirely sure. We can back up, sure.
I tend to agree with what Al's saying. I don't like using faith in that context, but I don't personally, as long as I'm able to make my objection to your use of the term, and I'm okay with it coming up in the future myself, I think there are better words to use than faith, because I think it is confusing to some people, because again, though that word does get equated a lot in our in the conversations that Al and I have with other people outside of the podcast that are more religious, and I do share his frustration. I kind of have a little more trust in you, John, about it, so I'm not as worried about it.
Hold on. I got trust in John, and I know this sounded like an attack on John. It's more an attack on that construct and that idea, and it really pisses me off when people use it, especially people I know that are as intelligent as John is.
Well, no, and the reason I said, when Joel was giving his response to me, the reason I said perfect a couple of times is because trust is exactly the same thing. It's just a different word, and yeah, you're absolutely right, Al. That word has some connotation that is different from the other word. I'll use the word trust. That's fine. It's the same concept.
See, the thing is it's not it's not the same concept in the world that we live in today. I can appreciate, because I use words in ways like similarly maybe that maybe most people wouldn't use them in the context that I use them. but that particular, it is a hot button word, okay, for Al, obviously, and for me too, if I'm being honest.
I don't know why people get that idea from me.
I don't know. I just can't even imagine. So it makes me anxious because I've seen that happen. I've seen that happen so many times where the whole, well, you have faith in the chair, and so God, and I know you're not going to do that, John, so I'm not as worried about it with you. I am more nervous about maybe listeners or other conversations that one might have where that will happen, and so I usually stamp that out right away, or try to. I don't usually drop a nuke like Al did, but.
Sorry, I didn't mean to blow up as bad as I did.
Yeah, you guys need to hug it out, guys. Because
I had a conversation just yesterday, and somebody was quoting fucking Kirk Cameron and the Banana Man, and using that same argument and the conflation equivocation fallacy, and to hear it from John today, I think just triggered my fucking asshole in me.
I think you kind of PTSD'd there a little bit.
I did. I really did. I had flashbacks to wanting to strangle that motherfucker.
Well, in your defense, I can think of far better sources than Kirk Cameron for just about anything.
Well, most people can, but it's just, oh God, there are some fallacies that just drive me
and snap.
There are some fallacies that just drive
today
me up
in
the
Vancouver.
Equivocation, conflation fallacies are probably the worst, especially with the word faith. And the
death toll continues to rise as chaos resumes.
Oh, that's funny.
It's all good. I'll use different words. I have this problem with people, I'm
not trying to control what you say. You're
going to get that objection every time from me. I just on that level, I can tell you that because of what that word does in society. So you're welcome to use that word if you feel it's appropriate. I am fine with that. But in certain cases where we're talking about my having faith, that's where when the statement is you have faith to believe that because a guy knows how to put a rocket in space that it's in space, that's where I guess it bugs me because it's not faith. So there we go. Anyways, wow, that was a tangent.
So the point I was trying to make is that unless you're the one doing the research, you're trusting that the researcher has done due diligence in finding out that information that you are using to construct your reality matrix.
I'm not only trusting that. That's not the only thing that I'm trusting in that scenario. I'm also trusting in the fact that in science, if you want to make a name for yourself, you prove somebody wrong. That's like the whole construct of science is to be critical of your ideas, your colleagues' ideas. So ideas are always under attack, and that's the umbrella under which I feel like I'm able to have this trust.
And the trust isn't an authoritarian trust. It isn't this scientist said, or this scientist proposed this hypothesis.
It can be.
It can.
It all too often ends up being.
Usually by pseudoscience followers and anti-vaxxers, yeah, sure.
Well, see, again, there in the last 50 years, how many examples of junk science have you seen? In the last 10 months, Al, how many different kinds of junk science have you pointed out to me? How many times
here's the kicker though. Here's the kicker though, John, with the scientific process, even if it's junk science being proposed by one scientist, I have trust that the methodology of science and the process that it goes through, the methodology, through peer review, through purposeful falsification testing, it's going to go through experts and experts and experts in the field, and somebody is going to catch it eventually. So my trust is tentative on the community of scientists that are experts in their field going, so far this has proved true. If it doesn't prove true eventually, I can scrap it.
Well, absolutely. That
as far
goes
as my
for just
trust
about
goes.
everything. That goes for just about everything, including ghosts and outer space aliens. But as an example, I give you Piltdown Man. For 90 years, the discovery of Piltdown Man was scientific fact until somebody decided to look at it again and say, well, now wait a minute, this is not the jaw of a human being.
Yes, well, it doesn't even have to be that extreme. We're all learning. I would venture to guess that in 50 years, a huge portion of what we think we know now will be outdated. And that's not to say that now all of it is junk science or that the process wasn't observed. I think it's easy to say at this point in our history that science is the best epistemological way in which we can know something is being true. Now, that process is always happening. Science is not an end. Science is a process. It's always happening. And that's what it's all about. We can definitely apply the word junk science to certain things because it did not follow the scientific method. Usually because they're begging the question, they're confirmation bias. There's all these other biases that are happening, and corruption that happens. But that's not the kind of science that I'm talking about.
I get that. I understand.
Well, and there's a common. Go ahead, John.
What I'm trying to point out is that maybe for every one good discovery, there are 50 junk discoveries. That's an arbitrary number. I don't know if that's accurate or not. But there are a number of people who are going to listen to that junk science, regardless of whether or not it's proven or disproven, until it is actually disproven. So until somebody proves that Piltdown Man is junk science, people are going to believe in it. It's going to end up in textbooks. It's going to end up in lectures. And
that's where critical thinking and the evaluation of evidence.
Yeah, I get that. I understand.
Needs to be critically taught.
No, it's fine. That's perfect. That's beautiful. But until that happens, there are going to be those people who have designed a reality for themselves based on that science. Someday it's going to be proven junk science, but right now it is a lecture being given by a well-known and well-respected scientist. And
we should always have room for doubt in everything that we have, okay? And some people don't realize the value in that. Some people, and that's to bring up the F word again, that having doubt is devalued. In fact, if you have saying that you are 100% sure of something that you don't know is celebrated, I think that's the most destructive idea you can put into a person's mind.
Well, be careful, because even in that context, there is still a significant amount of doubt. I don't know a single, Christian who believes that Muslims are correct in their beliefs. I don't know a single Christian who believes that Jews are correct in their beliefs. They think that they are correct in their beliefs because that's the reality matrix that that has been laid over their frame of thought. Well, again, that is their perspective. That's their perception. You can't. I don't think you can ever say that an opinion is wrong, because an opinion is based on the information that has been given. However correct or incorrect that information is, that opinion is based on the information that has been presented. So
can we bring this back around, though? I mean, I appreciate what you're saying. I feel like we're kind of didn't get kind of beating a dead horse at this point. So let's bring this back around to how this, the people in our lives, they have their opinions, and as they perceive them, they think these opinions are true, and then having a kind conversation that is respectful and is charitable to their thoughts. Basically when I say charitable to their thoughts, I mean that we believe they genuinely believe these things, that they're not lying, basically, is what that means, that they don't have some awful agenda to a reason for saying what they're saying. So that's what I mean by being charitable to someone's ideas. So let's tie this back around. So we all have different levels of exposure to new ideas and to the current state of any given topic as far as evidential availability. So how do we have these conversations when flat out we love and care about people that are less learned than we are, or the opposite, that we love and care about people that would know way more than we do and we're uncomfortable, So I want to make sure we bring this back around, because the idea of this whole concept was about kindness, about relationships, about people,
Sure.
and how different they are than their ideas.
Which I failed on tonight, so I apologize to that, John.
I'm okay. So, recapping at least what I had to say. So, okay, there. You feel better? Okay.
Can we get one of those? Can we get one of those sitcom ahs in there, like from Full House or something?
I will see what I can do. Remind me about it later.
Recapping at least what I know I had to say.
And hey, while you're doing this, I'm going to be shutting my mic off for just a sec. Just want to let you guys know.
Oh, fine. Recapping what I think I had to say on that topic is tread lightly, but don't tread so lightly that you're not getting your point across. Don't be afraid to do damage, realizing that when the healing has happened, that other person's thoughts, reality is going to be stronger than it was before. But be careful not to shatter it completely. Be careful, baby steps. Present new data, give them the information that you have been given, that has given you your reality matrix, and the two of you are going to meet somewhere in the middle. He's not going to come over to your side, you're not going to come over to his side, you're going to meet somewhere in the middle. That's the way relationships work. Right, Al?
That's very true. And the other counter side of the whole thing that Joel brought up was not just people that are less exposed to the information than you, but people that you know and respect that have way more information than you, is not be afraid to listen to the information. Now, I know that John and I, during this episode, I got really heated. That doesn't mean that I discounted everything that he said. I respect a lot of what John says, and there's a lot of things and ideas that he holds that I don't respect.
Well, you respect him as a person, too.
Correct.
That's the starting place.
That was my next point, was I respect him as a person, and the fact that he's come to conclusions that he's come to. I don't respect the conclusions that he came to, because I believe some of those conclusions are faulty, but which we've talked about on air several times and in person. But the difference is, if somebody has more information than you, at least take it, evaluate it, and look at the information that they have, and then critically examine, why do you believe this? Why do you believe this to be true? And, take there's information John has given me that I've gone and researched on my own and gone, you know what? He believes this. I don't accept this yet. There's not enough here to convince me. And take that position of doubt and go, look, I'm not saying that I don't believe it. I'm saying that I don't accept it, which I guess is the same thing. Correction. Back up. Not saying that this is absolutely wrong, but I just don't believe it yet. I don't accept it. That's the wording I was looking for.
Don't accept the framework that I've given you. Yeah, absolutely.
Correct. So be willing to take in the information. You don't have to put it on a tentative, just like you should with anything, even scientific theories to this point. Theories are very, very well tested, peer-reviewed, falsified, etc. Take those on a tentative. Yes, this is currently where our information has led us to this point. It could change in the future. Right now, this is what we know. It's like the date of the Earth has gone. Over the past 100 years, we've been able to more accurately determine how old the Earth is. And at this point, we've come to 4.9 billion years. It may get even farther or more accurately determined later. It's a tentative right now.
Again, using a certain framework, a well-tested framework, a rather strong framework, but yeah, it's still just a framework. Next year, somebody may come up with some new technology that completely revolutionizes our ability to I don't know, detect time.
But that's part of the process, though.
Yeah.
That's how we get to those revelations. I should not have used that word. I'm using that word.
Very creative. Fucking Joel.
I know.
Do I have to PTSD on your ass, too?
Oh, God. Apparently.
Another nuclear bomb.
Well, the information is there to be revealed in some sense.
Revealed?
Just not by a deity.
Somebody just pulled an equivocation fallacy right here.
Don't act like you've never seen a hypocrite before, asshole.
I see one in the mirror every morning. I'm good.
And something that came up though in my mind as John was talking is maybe it's possible, and here we are getting into parsing words, is that maybe respect, using the word respect in the context of discussing ideas, even if you agree with them, isn't actually the right word to be using. Even if you agree with somebody's conclusion, maybe we shouldn't say I respect that conclusion, because I think that's a misuse of the term. Absolutely. I think acceptance, like Al was saying, is a good word to use. You're accepting or not accepting, or on some continuum therein. I think that using that word respect when it comes to ideas, even the ones that we agree with, is a really slippery slope.
I can't count how many times, both in the religious and in the scientific community, I've seen or experienced debates where two people are using different words to describe the exact same thing, and they're arguing, debating, almost coming to blows about these things, and they're saying the exact same thing but using different words.
Or the opposite of that, using the same word to describe totally separate things.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that's a problem. I mean, language and how we communicate this stuff is so important, and that's why I did want to put in my objection about using the word faith, and that's why Al is harassing me about using the word revelation, because this stuff is actually important. You might think we're just sitting here just talking shit, but this stuff does have value. I mean, I don't know how to express that in a better way. Can you guys help me with this? Because I'm fearing that our listeners are like, why are they arguing about the definition of a word? Well, that's literally the way we're able to talk about these things, is through language. And if we're not accepting on what the value of certain words is, then what the fuck are we even doing?
Because we need that common frame of reference. When I use the word faith earlier, I had a picture of trust. I had a picture of a child and a mother. I had a picture of trust, a student and a teacher. Whatever, that mentorship relationship. I didn't have a picture of a fuzzy white man up in the clouds. I had a picture of that trusting relationship. So what we really see. Okay, this is how I know that telepathy doesn't exist. Because if it did, the language would not fail us.
I mean, I don't know that those it's necessarily a cause and effect there for me because
Yeah,
I'm
not seeing the connection there.
The reason why is because you could have, in theory, you could have some people that are telepathic and others that aren't, and still have that failure. So
I'm about to facepalm.
That's the thing. That's the thing. If the species possessed the ability to be telepathic, then everyone would have it, because it would have to be a species-wide thing.
That's not necessarily true, because not everybody has the ability to speak or see. Not everybody has the same skin tone or height, or some people are literally born without fucking eyes.
Okay, so without abnormalities.
How are you to say that that's abnormal? Now we're just getting argumentative at this point.
Sure you are. Sure you are.
Just ask him.
I'm sorry. After Joel's last little flap, I'm about to spaz.
Oh man.
I ruined Al's night.
Words are important. They're fucking critical. And if you don't have the definitions agreed upon, communication fails 100% of the time.
Imagine if we tried to do that with math. What if two meant something to one person and something else to a different concept to somebody else? Wouldn't that be a fucking problem if we're trying to communicate a mathematical principle? How is that really any different? We're not talking about creative language. That's a separate thing.
Or trying to have a conversation with somebody on LSD who's trying to tell you what red smells like.
Yeah, synesthesia, as they call that.
As somebody who experiences synesthesia from time to time, it is fucking awesome. You should enjoy it.
Well, I know that I often this isn't, I guess, quite technically synesthesia, but it's similar in that I know that there are certain words that I swear in my brain there's sort of a geometrical equivalent to them that I could never draw it or even really describe it. But when I'm thinking about more complex concepts or even music, like oftentimes these things will be sort of shapes in my mind as I'm working through these things, not really thinking to myself in English, but thinking in these weird shapes that have somehow construct it, and they're often not always the same per incident. It's very it's interesting. I know I'm in my creative mindset when that's happening.
See, nowadays, this is where the language actually succeeds, because nowadays we call that synesthesia. But 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 1,000 years ago, anybody who had that experience and who described that to an authority in their life on certain subject matters, that authority would probably call that either a mystical or a spiritual experience.
Yeah. And I'm certainly not doing that, and I'm not saying you said I did, but I mean we all are learning. We all need to be very sympathetic and empathetic to the people that we have in our lives, because let's face it, oftentimes, as much as we want to be around people that kind of see the world in a similar way, it makes it a lot more interesting when we have people that we care about that maybe don't see it in the same way, and again, people that we care about for reasons that don't have anything to do with how much they know. So, I certainly love my brothers that I had this conversation with earlier on in the week, and who knows more. So,
right.
Yeah,
tread lightly, not with kid gloves, but certainly not with an iron grip. Don't be afraid to do damage, realizing that perhaps you might be a part of that person's growth process.
And probably the better thing for me to do in that situation, even though he was being somewhat Socratic about his approach, the better thing in that situation might have been to sort of reverse that and kind of give him back the Socratic and then just listen.
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
So,
And sometimes it's just good to mute your mic and think for a few minutes before you fucking go all nuclear on somebody.
well, you know.
One of Plato's dialogues, he wrote a dialogue between Socrates and I think it was Euthyphro. That was the name of it.
Dilemma?
Yeah, I think that's a good example of exactly what you just described. Is and I'm not talking about the dilemma itself. I'm talking about the rhetoric that Plato had Socrates using in that dialogue. Was, you know, asking this guy, well, what do you think? Well, why do you think that? Well, let's trace that back a little bit. You know, you're not really throwing something back in their face and saying you're wrong. You're asking them, why do you believe this? You know, why?
Yeah. You can't approach it with a shitty attitude. You can't approach the Socratic method with a shitty attitude. You have to be willing to learn. You have to be asking questions that you really want to know the answers to. You can be somewhat leading with them. I think that's kind of the point. But if you're doing it to try and get your knockdown argument, that's not a good way to do it. That's not an authentic way to have a conversation with somebody. It's devious, and I totally agree. Yeah.
Sweet.
Echo chamber.
Yeah. Well, you know what? One thing I'm hoping is that in cyberspace, I hope that we don't have the same half-lives of nuclear waste that we do in real space. So hopefully there won't be much fallout here.
Nice.
I will take that to heart. Fucking guys.
All right. Well, we do need to wrap this up. It's been a interesting conversation, in my opinion.
Yeah, I enjoyed it.
I have faith in you, Al.
Don't do that. That's a horrible idea.
Okay. Well,
all right.
Al's not a racist.
At least not tonight, apparently.